There is an epidemic going on right now, and not enough people are talking about it. And it's called sleep apnea. More and more people are getting diagnosed with sleep apnea, but it's still not enough. Actually, it's not even close to enough. Studies are showing that approximately 20% of Americans suffer from sleep apnea. But out of those 20%, 90% of people are still undiagnosed. So what exactly is sleep apnea? Well, sleep apnea is basically when you're sleeping and something happens that disrupts your sleep and causes you to have what's called these micro arousals, where you're waking up multiple times in your sleep, and one, you're never getting those full sleep cycles, but also you could be having some breathing issues while you're sleeping. So there are different types of sleep apnea. The first and the most common is obstructive sleep apnea. So obstructive sleep apnea is when you have some sort of obstruction in your upper airway. And this is preventing air from getting into your lungs, and this is preventing you from getting enough oxygen. And this is what causes you to wake up in the middle of the night and not get that full sleep cycle, but it's also preventing that oxygen and as much oxygen that is necessary from getting to your brain and your other organs. Now, the second type of sleep apnea is called central sleep apnea. Now, this is a lot more rare than obstructive sleep apnea, but basically it's when your brain stops sending those signals to your breathing muscles to keep breathing, and this is what causes you to gasp for air and stop breathing in the middle of the night. And we also have complex sleep apnea. Now, complex sleep apnea is when you have a combination of both obstructive and central sleep apnea. So in this video, I'm gonna go over some signs that you might even have sleep apnea. And if you have any of these signs, I would encourage you to get a sleep study. And the reason is that, one, it doesn't hurt to get a sleep study. It's not going to do any harm to you. And the second reason is, if you do find out that you do have sleep apnea, well, the changes you make after that can greatly improve your quality of life. And not only that, it may even save your life. So one sign that you might have sleep apnea is that you are a mouth breather. So how do we know if we are a mouth breather or a nose breather? Well, one way is you can just catch yourself. Next time you're walking outside, next time you're just relaxing, watching one of my videos, check and see if your mouth is open or if your mouth is closed. If your mouth is open, there's a good chance that you are a mouth breather. And another way you might be able to tell is if you always have a dry mouth, or after you wake up at night, if you wake up with a really, really dry mouth. That's a sign that you're a mouth breather, because anytime you breathe through your mouth for a long period of time, you're drying up all that saliva in your mouth. Another reason you might be a mouth breather is if your nose is always congested, if you always have these allergies or sinus issues, and you just struggle breathing through your nose. Now, how can we switch over from breathing through our mouth to breathing through your nose? Because if my nose is always stuffy, or if I've always been a mouth breather, then how do I switch over? Or what if I still don't know if I'm a mouth breather? Like, what are some other ways to tell? Well, I actually made a video on exactly this topic, on figuring out how you even know if you're a mouth breather, reasons you became a mouth breather, and how to switch over from mouth to nose breathing. And I'm putting a link to that video in the description below. So how does mouth breathing contribute to sleep apnea? Well, there are a lot of different reasons. And one is when we are breathing through our mouth, we're not absorbing as much oxygen as we would when we breathe through our nose. And the reason is human beings were just designed to breathe through their nose. Our nose actually has a lot of these built-in features that our mouth just doesn't have. And I also dive into this more in some of my other videos, so I'm putting another link in the description below where you can watch more of that. But basically, when we breathe through our mouth, we absorb way less oxygen than breathing through our nose. And also, when we breathe through our mouth, we're more likely to have tonsil infections and more likely to have adenoid infections. And these infections can cause our tonsils and our adenoids to swell up more and more. And that swelling can cause some of that blockage in our upper airway, and that can block some of the air that's getting into our lungs. So on top of not getting enough oxygen already when we're breathing through our mouth, we're also gonna have some sort of resistance over time if we are mouth breathing for a long period of time. And also, mouth breathers tend to have very different facial features than people who are nose breathers. So people who are mouth breathers tend to have longer, skinnier faces, they tend to have narrower jaws, and they tend to have narrower airways. And what happens is you have this constricted airway when you are a mouth breather. So all these factors are working against you when you are a mouth breather. That's causing this upper resistance in your airway that can contribute to sleep apnea. Now, another sign that you have sleep apnea is if you snore. Now, snoring is basically a sign that you're not sleeping well and a sign that you're not getting enough air into your lungs. And actually, going back to mouth breathing, if you are a mouth breather, you are way more likely to snore. And the reason has to do with your tongue. When you are a mouth breather and you're leaning back and your head is back and you're sleeping, your tongue is going in the back of your mouth and the back of your throat. Now compare that when you are breathing through your nose. Now usually when you're breathing through your nose, your tongue is resting against the roof of your mouth. And your tongue is also resting against your soft palate. And when your tongue is in this position, it's keeping that upper airway open and allowing air to flow from your nose into your lungs. Now compare this to when you're a mouth breather and your tongue is falling back in the back of your mouth. Well, now your tongue is no longer resting against your soft palate, and instead it's going in the back of your throat. And when it does this, it's constricting that airway. So it's cutting off the air supply that goes from your mouth into your lungs. And this is also causing that snoring sound because now that it's no longer resting against your soft palate, it's causing that soft palate to start to vibrate. And this is what makes that super annoying snoring sound. What's really bad about this is not only is your airway getting resisted and you're struggling getting as much air to your lungs, over time what can happen is your tongue can start to fall more and more back and go all the way back in the back of your throat and completely cut off your breathing. And this is where that sleep apnea comes in because now you're waking up, you're gasping for air, and you're never getting that full sleep cycle again. And chances are, if you are doing this, you would never even realize this. You might even need to have someone else who's sleeping with you or watching you sleep to catch you doing this. So if someone ever catches you sleeping and they tell you that, hey, I saw you gasping in your sleep last night, or you woke up multiple times, and first of all, you were snoring, and then you would wake up and you would start gasping for air, and then you would go back to sleep. And it sounds really scary. It sounds like someone is literally dying. Well, if someone is sleeping like that, or if someone tells you that you're sleeping like that, then that might be a sign that you have some sort of sleep apnea or some airway blockage, and you should definitely get a sleep study. Now, another sign that you have sleep apnea is if you have a tongue tie. A tongue tie is basically when your tongue is glued to the floor of your mouth. Now, this again is going back to mouth breathing, and you'll notice a common trend here. But if your tongue is glued to the floor of your mouth, there's no way your tongue can move up to the roof of your mouth. And the reason that this happens is we have this attachment that's underneath our tongue that is attaching our tongue to the floor of our mouth. Usually when we're born, if we're born with a tongue tie like this will be clipped and we should be fine later on in life. But sometimes this just doesn't happen and we have to get what's called a tongue tie surgery later on in life. Now with the tongue tie surgery, it's basically just clipping that attachment and relieving that tongue so you have more freedom with your tongue. And this also comes with some tongue exercises to make sure that no more scar tissue forms and you keep that freedom of movement with your tongue. The reason that this can contribute to sleep apnea is if you have a tongue tie, that is kind of forcing you to be a mouth breather. And the reason is our tongue has a lot of muscles that attach to it. And some of these muscles will be attached to our jaw. Some of these muscles will also be attached to our neck. So when we have this freedom of movement with their tongue, like we do when we see a nose breather, and their tongue is usually resting against the roof of their mouth, then this is one, keeping their mouth closed because it's pulling that jaw up. Also, when your tongue is against the roof of your mouth, it's pretty much impossible to breathe through your mouth. So this is one, reinforcing that nasal breathing. But on the other hand, when we have a tongue tie and our tongue is against the floor of our mouth, and we're never putting against the roof of our mouth is always going to be open. So one, this can cause a lot of bad posture. So when our jaw is open, it's pulling our head forward. Over time, when our head falls forward, it puts a lot of weight on our shoulders and causes our shoulders to go forward. And this is what causes that forward head tilted posture, where if you see people walking around, you'll see they look like they have good posture, but when you look at them from the side, they have their head tilted forward all the time. So another sign that you have sleep apnea is if you just are tired throughout the day, if you have like a lack of focus, if you are struggling remembering things, or if you are showing symptoms of ADHD, or if you just feel like you have ADHD and you're thinking about getting a test, or you were even diagnosed recently with ADHD. Now, the reason should be obvious here, right? Because we know that when we have sleep apnea and we're never getting a full sleep cycle, that one, our body is never recovering as well. Because if we're never getting a full sleep cycle and we're never getting that deep stages in our sleep, then our body's gonna really struggle remembering things. It's really gonna struggle focusing. But also, when we're not getting enough air into our lungs, we're not getting enough oxygen to our brain and our other organs, then our brain is constantly gonna be tired and we're constantly gonna be tired. And this is gonna cause us to show a lot of weird symptoms of just being tired throughout the day. The weird thing is that a lot of these symptoms are really similar to the symptoms of ADHD. So the symptoms of ADHD are, a lot of them are being, like hyperactive, you're being impulsive, you can't really focus that well, you're interrupting other people. These are the same symptoms of being tired, but the only difference is when you're tired, the reason that you're doing this is to keep yourself awake. And if you don't believe me, then ask the research out there. So there's a lot of research out there that is linking the symptoms of being tired with the symptoms of ADHD. And also there's literature out there that says that people who are mouth breathers, who have some sort of airway obstruction, and people who snore, they are 40 to 100 times more likely to have symptoms similar to ADHD. So one thing that I always say, if I see a parent that brings their kid into my clinic, or someone says that they think they have ADHD, or they're getting tested for ADHD, I always ask if they got a sleep study. And if they never got a sleep study, then I strongly encourage them to get a sleep study first. And the reason is there's a chance that ADHD could have been misdiagnosed, especially if the child was a mouth breather and they had airway obstruction issues, and if they had sleep apnea the whole time. And a lot of times you'll see that this ADHD, these medications, they will solve a lot of the same issues that people are having because one, you're getting a lot more dopamine when you're taking these ADHD medications, and that's gonna keep you awake, but it's not really solving the root cause. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that ADHD is a fake disease or anything, but I do think that people should value their sleep more. And if they've never gotten a sleep study, but they're showing these symptoms, then I think they should start there. Now, another sign that you have sleep apnea is if you are very overweight or you are obese. So just having more fatty deposits in your neck area and just having like a really thick neck can alone block some of that airway from getting into your lungs. The thing with this is, again, we're gonna go back to mouth breathing. You're gonna hate me after this, I swear. But people who are tired and people who already have sleep apnea, they're more likely to be overweight because one symptom of being tired is also overeating. And again, it's just to keep yourself awake. So people who are tired are more likely to be overweight. So we don't know, like maybe it's a sleep apnea that's causing people to eat more and get overweight, or maybe it is the fact that they're overweight that's causing this airway resistance and causing the sleep apnea. So what is the underlying theme behind this video? If you have any of these symptoms, or if you think you're having bad sleep, make sure you get a sleep study. Now, it's not just about the sleep study, right? That is definitely one part of it, and I definitely want you to get it, but there are other ways to improve your sleep as well, rather than just being diagnosed with sleep apnea and getting some sort of CPAP machine or other device to improve the way that you're breathing when you're sleeping. Now, I do dive into some other ways to improve your sleep, and I'm putting a link to some of those videos that I made in the description below. So make sure you guys check those out. And as always, if you haven't already, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to my channel below. I will see you guys in the next video.